My name is Karen. I joined the Bridges Internship, which is a 6-month internship program that equips believers to reach out locally to people of the Islamic faith. What led me to get involved in Bridges was my exposure to people who are Muslim about a year before that. I went on the Jordan trip in July of 2018, and that was an incredible journey for me, a great experience in meeting Muslim refugees on the other side of the world. And when I got home from that, I wanted to see how I could apply my experience in something that I could do locally, right where I live. I felt like there was a gap in the knowledge that I had between what I knew and what would make me feel comfortable to actually go out and make connections with Muslims. And so I joined the Bridges internship so that I could learn more about the Islamic faith and just really break down those barriers so that I could reach out and have conversations with people who are not like me. I feel much more comfortable now approaching people who are Muslim with a simple greeting like Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. And just starting that conversation, giving a smile, and it can be as simple as that. And that was something that definitely changed for me. Just being able to feel more comfortable to approach people who are different. I really liked all the books that we studied. There was one that was called Across the Street and Around the World, and it talked about outreach to Muslims in other countries, but then it also talked about just doing the simple act of walking across the street and talking to a Muslim who lives right where you already are in your other place. And I was deeply convicted by this because I realized that I had Muslims who literally lived across the street from me, who I very rarely interacted with because I didn't feel comfortable doing so. It prompted me to actually walk across the street and have a conversation with somebody. And she had been living in the United States for probably 30 years at that point. They had immigrated from Iran a few decades ago and were living in the United States. But I didn't realize how much she was going through as a person and in her family. And so she told me that she takes care of her elderly parents. She works full time, but during the evenings and the nights, she's always on duty, taking care of her parents, and she wakes up several times a night and she's just exhausted. And after she confided in me, I realized that I had missed this opportunity all along to really come alongside her and be her friend and show her the love of Jesus. And so I made that connection with her, and now we're friends, and now she knows that I'm somebody who she can go to. Also, there's a son who lives there, and he was repairing his car one day, and he was underneath the car doing something, and I walked across the street to talk to him, and he told me that there was a tool that he needed, and I thought, hey, I have a garage full of tools, so I just decided to go back to my house and see if I could find what he was looking for. And I could tell that he was really deeply appreciative that I had taken the time to talk to him and to give him this tool to borrow. And he made a comment like, oh, well, there are good people in the world, or something like that. Just that simple conversation and act can really open up the door for future conversations that can have an impact for eternity. During the internship, we memorized parables, and then we would recite them in front of the group, which was a little bit terrifying at first, but we were told that we should probably tell the parables in our own words, and so it got easier with time. But I just realized that there was just such a power in telling stories about Jesus and telling his parables. A lot of Muslims are receptive to parables because they already know about Jesus. Jesus is mentioned in the Quran, and he is highly regarded by Muslims, and so they're very excited to hear more about him. I was particularly impacted by a parable that I had heard many times, but in the context of the outreach that we were doing, it meant something different to me. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, somebody asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" And he does this because he's trying to justify himself that he is being a neighbor to the people around him that he chooses to be. And so Jesus so cleverly answers not that question, but he answers the question of what kind of heart must one have in order to be a neighbor to all? Jesus is very clear that we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, even those neighbors that don't look like us, don't talk like us, are not from the same country as us, and those who practice a different religion. My understanding of the Islamic faith is that it's a religion that's based on works, and there is a reverence and a fear of God, but there isn't the close relationship with God that we have. I truly desire that people who are Muslim and raised Muslim will have their eyes opened and be able to see the true love that Christ brings, and that He has delivered us from our sins, that He has washed us completely clean, that He gives us a salvation that we cannot earn on our own. And that's something that they truly need to hear. I definitely recommend the Bridges internship to anybody who's interested. It's a great way to bond with other believers. I just didn't realize how close I would get with the group. I think that it was like a growth group, but even more than that, because we had this shared mission. There was a pretty significant time commitment involved. I mean, we had studies throughout the week. We were reading books, about a book a month, and answering questions and journaling and praying, and then a little bit of outreach throughout the week. And then on Sundays we would get together for 3 or 4 hours, have lunch together. And so it was a huge commitment for the 6 months, but it was completely worth it. I didn't realize how much I would gain from this experience. I grew so much closer in my relationship to Jesus. I better understood why it is I believe what I believe, so that I could express that to other people. I learned how to articulate my faith. I learned how to explain why I believe what I believe. I think sometimes we don't realize that we've added on to Christianity. We've added on our cultural practices, the way that we worship, the way that we pray, and these are not bad and they're not wrong, but I was surprised that during this internship we did a lot of really honing in on what it means to truly follow Jesus. And I was able to see the core of what I believe, so that I can then present the gospel in a way that doesn't have all of those cultural attachments to it, so that it's palatable to somebody who may not be from our culture.